Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is doing well. If you submitted your assignment before 2 o'clock this afternoon, I got them all graded and gave you a couple of comments back. So what I want to do this evening is a little recap of last week, and then let's move into having you discuss what you found out and you learned in your research over the past week, and then what we're going to cover going forward. So we ended last week and we talked just a little bit about some of the policies I wanted you to take a look at. So I have a question for you that I want you to think about for just a minute. Given now that you've read the summaries and you've done some research on state and local environmental policy, what do you think about this question? Is the future impacted by policy, or is policy impacted by future plans, or both? And why? So when you're ready,
Can you repeat the question?
sure. Is the future impacted by policy, or is policy impacted by future plans, or both, and why?
Well, I'll jump in. I think it's both. I,
And
I it
why?
well, it seems in reading through the work, a lot of the policies or some of the policies are driven by what has been accomplished to that point and where there's deficits, right? So, we wanted to have um, preserve native species, and we've noticed that there's a gap in terms that like we need to do more. So then a policy comes out to help to address that, um, but to the extent that there isn't funding or practice and so on, it just seems like it's a bit of a circle, where where you're not achieving the results that then drives the need to readdress policy, if that makes
Okay,
sense.
it makes sense.
Hmm.
Who else has some thoughts?
I I can't. I'm looking at it from the lens of what we're going through today, and I think the future will impact the policy. And I base that on the premise of what the political environment is. I would say probably 10 years ago, that would have been the reverse. For instance, climate change policy and legislation really impacted how governments um, handled things such as water, clean water, pollutants, emissions. But in today's time, there's been a shift from a governmental perspective, more to the right. And I see that that's reversed. Just today, Trump has made a major change to the EPA regulation where um, the regulation governing emissions and pollutants, he's canceled that. So I think it depends on the political situation.
Okay, who else has some ideas? So usually policy is driven one of two ways, right? Top down or bottom up. Either it's government enforced and pushed down and implemented, or people, voters, constituents, special interest groups decide they're going to create a policy and push it up. So, what do you think is happening now? Is it more top down or bottom up?
Top
Um,
down.
Does anybody disagree
I,
with top
I
down?
I was going to say bottom up,
Okay.
but it depends on how you define top, right? So I see a lot of the driving coming from certain types of collective groups, like the Watership Authority, or here in Massachusetts, the wildlife associations, and so on. I mean, I think they're really more grassroots driving it up. But again, it depends on how you define top down. It's not the governor that's necessarily driving it, but more responding to the requests that are coming in to help with, pollinator pathways or whatever from the various constituents.
So then, do you think that? So one of the things that when I was a lobbyist that I learned early on was if we created the parade, the officials would come lead it. They weren't so interested in getting everybody to follow them on a difficult topic, but they were more than happy if we got a group together to come out there and take credit for everything that we did. Do you think that's going on today, or do you think that the voter is less likely to be acknowledged by the elected representatives?
It From a federal level, I would say the voter is less acknowledged. From a local level, it really depends on where you live and the activism of the citizens in that area, that locality, that will predict how that goes. I look at my own community, and it is very active, especially when it concerns the environment. And I think a lot of politicians will propose an idea. For instance, there was the local golf course. A developer purchased it and wanted to turn it into, high-end townhouses. Well, the community fought that because that's one of the few green spaces we have, even though it is a golf course and they use a lot of water. But the community fought that. And initially, the politicians were for it. But when they saw the community get behind not allowing that to happen and felt, okay, my job's on the line if I don't back my constituents on this. So they backed off and it didn't happen. But in the case where, you have maybe federal authority, no matter how you feel, they can come in and say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And we are doing it because it's for your benefit, even though you don't like it.
Sounds like your parent, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I know what's good for you. So let's take a look or a listen to what you found in your research. So who wants to go first?
I'll go.
Okay.
No, Amanda, you want to go first?
That's all right. Go ahead.
I did my research on invasive, species in Virginia and how Virginia is managing that. And the state has made an effort to manage and eradicate not native, but invasive species and replace them with natives. However, what I found in my research and reading the law, it's very soft. It's um, it's a policy that was basically defined through a consensus of state agencies, commercial entities, academic institutions, citizens groups, garden groups, etc. A lot of people had input into this policy. It does address invasive species, but at a very soft level. We shouldn't Folks should use natives instead of invasives. On state properties, we will, if we find invasives, we'll try to eradicate them. We'll define what we consider invasive, but we stop short of telling the public whether they can or cannot plant or have invasive plants in their gardens or on commercial properties. We recommend natives. We tell you that this is evasive. We tell you that the harm it does, but we stop at that point. We don't go any further. And for me, it's like you're either going to make an effort to minimize invasive plant species and other invasive things such as insects, etc., in the Commonwealth for the good of all, not just the homeowner, commercial, business, the state, etc., but for everyone to protect the ecosystem, or you're not. And I feel they've made a good start at with the legislation they have and some of the policies and procedures they have in place and the working groups, but I think they need to go a bit farther.
Sonia, how would you recommend they go farther? What would you tell Abigail to do? So
Okay.
Abigail Spanberger is your new governor,
Okay.
right? So what would you tell her?
Okay. They just enacted a new law that essentially all nurseries, big box stores, anyone that sells plants, if they're selling a plant that is considered invasive by the state of Virginia, and there's a published list of invasive plants, they are to put a sign next to that plant saying it's invasive. You may want to consider purchasing this. In my opinion, if you consider it evasive and it has the possibility or high potential of harming our ecosystem, why allow it to be sold in our state? For me, I would say go further and ban it. If there's questions about it being evasive, pull it off the list, figure out, have the working groups that the state has put together, investigate this particular plant and plant material, and make a decision, educated decision based on science and environmental studies on whether it's invasive or not. But if it's considered truly invasive, why allow it to be planted? For instance, bamboo. A lot of people like to plant bamboo because it makes a great screen, privacy screen, but it's highly invasive. It's hard to eradicate. So if we really want our citizens not to use these plants, why not put a little bit of teeth behind it and say, this is illegal to plant in the state of Virginia. We will cite you. We'll give you an opportunity to remove it. And if you choose not to, we may take remedies such as the state will remove it, um, and maybe fine you or something like that.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
if it's really harmful to the ecosystem and our native flora and fauna, why allow it in the state?
yeah, Sonia, I can just from the Massachusetts perspective, just so you'll know, we have exactly what you're suggesting. It's actually, if there are plants or insects even, but plants are obviously easier to to manage. But they're if they're on the prohibited list, they are actually banned not only from planting, but you can't import them, you can't sell them, you can't propagate them, right? So you can't even, you should not be able to acquire them and bring them into Massachusetts, right? So I think that sounds along the lines of what you're suggesting.
Yes, very much so. I think the state wants to make progress in this arena, but they're not there yet. And they're basically establishing remedies that are such as putting up signs saying it's invasive but not prohibiting someone from selling it to satisfy commercial um, aspects or commercial dealers or nurseries, etc., who are concerned that their bottom line will be affected, but also satisfy people like me who, I'm a master gardener, I work in the community, and I see some of the damage invasives have done, by putting up the sign. So it's maybe they consider it as a win-win. We've satisfied both camps for now, but I don't think with all the effort and time put into this invasive group and committee at the state level, it's effective. It's kind of like a little band-aid to keep everybody happy. And it doesn't truly address the problem of evasives. I like what Massachusetts is doing because we've determined that this is invasive and harmful, and we're not going to allow it in the state, period.
Thank you. Who else who wants to go next?
I can go.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm in Pennsylvania, and when I looked through the policies in Pennsylvania, they were pretty clear. However, what was noted is that enforcement of policies pretty much is given at the municipal level. So I looked into what some policies and what's going on in some municipalities or counties. The one I'm living in, the one I'm going to be moving to. The area I focused on was open spaces in metropolitan areas. And the reason I picked that is that we're looking at higher density populations and trying to bring in some ecological value, but still also have uh, that social, recreational space and combining those. Of course, I did my typical research. I go down the rabbit hole. And, as I was researching more, I found, I think the Penn State Extension was supporting programs in education. So if you're bringing more of sustainable landscapes into that area, a lot of people are balking at it, not liking it. And so there's some ways to educate and make more awareness of landscapes that are more sustainable, what they look like, native plants. And I thought that was really a key point, and I'm glad to see that.
So, Amanda, what were some of the key things people did not like? That native plants look unruly?
Yeah. So we actually I'm in Chester County now, but I'm moving to Lehigh County. We have a very large corporation, Air Products and Chemical, who recently rebuilt their facilities, and they have several acres. They went with a landscape company that did native plants, and it looks like a big weed field initially. So getting till things start filling in, I believe, and I hope I have this correct, that a lot of the plantings, when you plant something like that, are more like a cover till other things start to grow in, I think. And I comments were like, when are they going to mow that down? Because right across the street is an industrial park that has the maintenance crews out there every day, the green grass, the lined up trees. Yeah. So it's stark contrast between the two.
I'm not sure what it is in Pennsylvania, but I know here, if that's what you're trying to do, is like turn this into a native plant meadow or something like that, you don't mow it for 3 years.
Correct. Yeah.
I think people are going to continue to be a little upset.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It just is. Thanks.
Mhm.
Who's next?
I'll share with my research endeavor.
Okay.
So my research was on an area that our office is in, which is in Washington Crossing, Pennsylvania. Kind of went down a rabbit hole or three or four. So I think the overall experience with this and what I found was a gem. That because this area is considered a historic district, there are certain regulations that were put on a code for this district in 2005. So it's been a while. To guide not only the buildings, but the signage and the lighting and the parking and the spacing, everything, and how the sidewalk should look, all this stuff. But there was a really nice description of instructions for landscaping. And I was really happy to read this. And since my husband and I have been in this building for the last 5 years, I've had a couple of conversations with the guy with the backpack with the mower and the guy with the backpack and the wand, and he's spraying. And, some conversations went better than others. Let's just leave it at that. But my landlord, who will be moving into this building, um, doesn't really see the importance of not using chemicals and, whatnot. So I wanted to approach my landlord and say, can I be your landscaper? Because, I just want to take care of the property. It's a gorgeous piece of property. It's not very big, but there's a lot of native trees here. So in finding this policy that actually gives some recommendations for, preservation of mature trees and the type of caliber tree you should plant and the list of native plants to PA that, would meet these requirements, and you want to maintain the historic charm of the area. I just felt so empowered by reading this policy. I was like, okay, so now I can approach the landlord and say, please don't pave under. I meant to say, the roots would be covered with pavement right now. It's like a crushed gravel, which
Yeah.
is a mess when the snowplower guy comes. It's just, I've got people bringing mud in the office all the time. But I didn't want him to pave under this red oak tree and a whole bunch of things. So now I feel I can make reference to this policy or code. And I have a resource which I didn't even think about looking for, didn't even know it existed until this assignment. So thank you.
You're welcome.
But I think that the gist of it is that not only have I feel more empowered to approach my landlord about, maybe we can change a couple of things, but I also noticed that some of the trees that were planted have been knocked over by windstorms. Cars have crashed into them. But I want to find out, like, how can I approach the people who created this policy in 2005? Who is on that committee? And what can we do about maintaining it? There wasn't any reference in the policy about maintenance. So that's something else I learned, and it was absent, and I'm not sure how those things normally go because I'm not a policy person. I can follow rules, but I don't go to the policy book unless I'm in the hospital. And I have to know it for, our inspection or something. But yeah, so I felt empowered by this discovery of this code, and I was so glad to see the long list of native plants that they want in this area.
So if you really want to do that, if you go to that statute or that policy,
Yeah,
it will have a name.
it does. Yeah.
Okay, it has a history. You should be able to Google the history of that bill, right? So before it becomes law, well, I'm older, but the Capitol Hill, right? I'm only a bill. I'm sitting on Capitol Hill, Schoolhouse Rock.
Yeah,
So,
I remember.
yeah.
It was
Okay.
traumatizing.
So you go find the title of that bill, and then you can find out the sponsor and the chief sponsors, right? So they're chief sponsors and sponsors to every piece of legislation.
Okay.
So then you can find out whether or not they are still in office.
Oh,
You can then track a bill history.
oh, even though it's a code, is a code
Yeah.
the same thing?
The code all came out of it. It had to come out of a piece of legislation somewhere. And then they pass it, and then they put it in the code, right? So usually it's a bill to amend and reenact a very specific piece of code.
Okay.
If you have trouble, just send me an email and I'll help walk you through the beginning of it.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to find out what I can do. I'm also taking a tree tenders program with the states. So there's that too.
I can't help you with that, but I can help you with this one.
I
Just
was thinking of joining the two forces. That's why I was like, oh, that's going to be kind of cool.
Then you might want to look at the National Wildlife Habitat Protection Steward Program.
Oh,
It's in all 50 states.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So who's next?
I'll go.
Okay,
So, I found out that over here in Newcastle County in Delaware, that back in I think 2020 or 2022, they enacted a policy that better protected the forested areas for natural habitat. And so they put that in place to kind of like keep natural habitat from getting destroyed from like landscaping and stuff like that. And so that like kind of makes it more strict when it comes to where you can plant, kind of what you can do on your property, especially if you border one of these protected areas. And I think it's a really good policy to help maintain the wildlife and the habitat.
so why is that good, Daniel? So you're saying
Well,
this policy actually does what? It protects an area that's currently forested?
yeah.
So what is the benefit overall by protecting that?
Well, we're not going to be destroying the native habitat, and it's there to help protect the native resources for native wildlife, and also there to help like mitigate irrigation runoff, not
Mhm.
irrigation runoff,
Or stormwater runoff.
stormwater runoff, yeah, and to help kind of like maintain the natural environment around here.
So it protects wildlife habitat. It feeds the wildlife. It stops excess stormwater from running off and causing pollution. It
Hmm.
helps air quality. So all in all, it's a pretty good policy.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's great.
Okay, who's next?
Can go. Um, so I live in Chester County, Pennsylvania, and I had researched a state statute that, like, the scope of which related to controlled plants and noxious weeds. And so for like as part of this statute, there is like a committee on controlled plant and noxious weed committee. And so they have the authority for determining what qualifies as like a noxious weed, as invasive. um, I was seeing like how they determine who's on the committee, and there's like various appointed officials like the Secretary of Environmental Protection and Transportation, but they also have representatives from various fields, relevant fields such as like farming, horticulture, and higher education. So I guess my takeaway from that was I felt like it had like a balanced uh, amount of perspectives, and it seemed like knowledgeable, qualified people to be on that committee. Um, and so, yeah, they would be able to determine what would qualify as a noxious weed. However, they would allow for permits to cultivate and distribute um, such plants, invasives. Um, one of which would be if the plant was a sterile variety. And so for that, that was a portion of the statute that I had reservations just because, there's like the history of like the Callery pear where it was like a sterile cultivar, but then it was able to cross-pollinate with other varieties and, proliferate. So I know speaking from living up here in Pennsylvania in the mid-Atlantic, sort of in March, they like litter all the sides of the roads and highways. So I guess that's where I think the statute should be amended in that I guess there are certain plants that can be determined sterile, but life finds a way. So I don't know. I think that should be more restrictive.
So, sterile means it can't reproduce its own kind with itself, right?
Hmm.
It doesn't mean it won't make whoopee with somebody else.
Yeah,
So, do you know if that pear is at all related to the Bradford pear?
I believe so.
So, the reason I ask is in North Carolina, one of the things that the government did with the Bradford pear is it was so invasive and it was all over the road. I think it was one of the first plants that when a developer put in a development, they order 900 of them and each yard gets one right in the middle of the front. They were all over the place. And so North Carolina was offering, they would give a homeowner 5 trees, 5 native trees, if you cut down your Bradford pear, which then just stops, right? Nothing's going to happen because the tree's completely gone. So I don't know if that's something to amend your legislation with or not, or if that would even help.
Yeah, to be honest, like just personally, like I don't really see calorie pears for sale anymore in like any of the nurseries that I go to. But I do know there are other plants that are defined as invasive in Pennsylvania, and there are sterile cultivars that are for sale. So like one that comes to mind is like buckthorn. Like, I see that for sale in nurseries, but that's on the invasive species list. But they, I guess, have a permit for that, that it's deemed sterile. So I guess my concern is, are we going to have a similar situation where this is going to be cross-pollinating and spreading around?
And it's an interesting, good question too, I think. Who's next?
I can go.
Thank you.
Um, so mine was on Asheville, North Carolina, and last year they put in a new rule that anybody, there's a large grant that they're giving to people who want to build on public lands, and it sorry, it will it requires that people not only build sustainably, um, but to purposely show how they are going to help control stormwater flooding. And they would do that by adding vegetation near like the French Broad River, or showing how in landscape design they can do like rain gardens or bioswales. Um, yeah, so they're encouraging all the sustainable um, growth through the funding.
How do you think that's going to change that area, or do you think it will?
I mean, it's not gonna, I mean, I'm sure people are more inclined to do like native stuff residentially, and anything they can do to control soil erosion. And if you're designing near a creek or a river, and there are a lot of creeks around there, then you do have to have certain, what do you want to call it? Like the buffer to the creek, you have to use make sure you have soil erosion plants. In general, if you are planting in North Carolina, as you know, like the whole state, starting in 2023, if you're planting as in any public areas like the side of the highway, you have to use native plants, native seeds. But I think this, I mean, it's gonna be anything's better, you know. And so I think it will help, because if everyone has that in the back of their mind, and it's so hilly there, you have to have all these soil erosion methods in place if you're gonna keep it from happening again.
That's true. And that was some really bad flooding too.
Yeah.
I know, has everybody had opportunity to talk about their research?
I haven't gotten into mine.
Okay.
It's a little broader than some of the topics. So I had to, after going through, all the different references that you mentioned in the last class, I had zeroed in on the biodiversity area, and in particular in Massachusetts, there's an executive order that was passed by the governor 2 years ago, and it's quite broad in terms of its goals. It's focused on 4 main areas: preservation, restoration, and apologies, it's so broad, sustain, and then connect. And it's actually covers pretty much all the topics we've talked about. In the preservation side, it does things like looking to allocate an additional 425,000 acres of land into as critical habitats and preserve them for um, you know, protection, if you will. It's mandates establishing a series of natural corridors to allow for biodiversity across different um, areas, if you will. And I'm just trying to summarize it. And the on the restoration side, it's actively managing invasive species in the wetlands in particular, which we've got quite a few of, and streamlining permitting where there are projects that adhere to and provide immediate benefits for both biodiversity and resilience. So, those two are really more on, what we want to preserve, what we want to restore, and then sustaining. It's very much focused on local farming, fisheries practices to help in investing to build workforces, to build technologies around those and restore the habitat. So it's also kind of the HR part of it, which is, we need that talent and knowledge and experience in order to grow in what they refer to as the blue economy, which is really about everything related to the Maritimes, if you will. And then lastly is the connect side of it, which is building gardens, parks, and so on that will promote the connection between wildlife and residences, if you will. Um, it's building schools and school programs to help teach young students more and kind of adopt that level of engagement with young people, get them involved early, and then a lot of work around licenses and training to again build the next generation of conservationists and restoration workforce, and really building that knowledge. Um, so my analysis was that it was a pretty far-reaching and quite specific set of goals that it's set. And I think there's been quite some progress on it. That the challenge has been that progress is really to the extent that it had been funded by existing programs, because there's effectively a $2.9 billion bill right now that's been put forward in this current um, um, year to help fund all of those programs. So it's got quite a bit of traction and support throughout the different organizations and the Commonwealth in general. So, it's all the true adoption and achievement of those goals is very much dependent on having the funding behind it to be able to implement the practices and the policies and so on and so forth that would really have an impact in the overall biodiversity.
Thanks. Did anybody find anything that really surprised you? Was anything, I know Carolyn talked about now she's got power to go talk to the landlord and she's got legislation behind her and she can say this statute says this. But did anything surprise you, shock you, disappoint you?
Well, for me, just while it's fresh, I was pleasantly surprised at the level of participation and a kind of promotion of not just things like the Audubon Society of the Wildlife, but just broader organizations that have gotten involved in backing and promoting and understanding the value is not just to landscape, the value is to the overall quality of life. And I thought that was a pleasant surprise. I didn't realize that we had made that much progress in terms of sustainable living and people understanding the value of what needs to be done to preserve our environments.
It's a nice surprise.
Yeah, it was.
Anybody else surprised, shocked, or disappointed? Not so much. Go ahead. Was somebody
I
going to
was surprised to find so I did research on the Clean Water Act and how that is manifested locally where I live near Seattle. And we have a lot of water in our ecosystem. And I did not realize that the stormwater code and manual for the city of Seattle, if you include all the appendices, is 1,000 pages long. And this is intended to be used by designers, homeowners, builders, but to the residential level. And I just thought, wow, I was shocked. I was shocked by that. And, some pages are photos and whatnot, but still, that's a tome. I don't know. So yeah, I thought is that going too far? I don't know. I was shocked by that. I'm sure that's got great, I didn't read it all, of course, but it has great information in there. But yeah, 1,000 pages for a user like myself, or I thought that was a lot to expect.
And that sounds like a bit much. Anybody else? So somebody brought up biodiversity. Elizabeth, was that you? So what does it mean? We're starting to use these words and we're starting to look at policy, environmental policy. What does biodiversity mean and why is it important? And if so, why?
Are you asking me, or is that out to
Everybody in general, jump
Yeah,
in.
okay. I'm throwing it out. Well, I guess I'll start by saying biodiversity is really about understanding that there has to um, how do I say this? That again, my pet subject is really pollination and bees, and understanding that it's not enough just to count the number of bees, right? To say, okay, we have a healthy population. There has to be diversity in terms of the different kinds of bees. So, we've got all different types of bees that do different things, and biodiversity. I mean, so just illustratively, that's the same if you apply it in the broader set of the world, and that we need to ensure that the native plants, the native species all continue to thrive, and that there is, not just one sole species of turtle left, that there's got to be enough to be able to maintain, and because they all tie together, right? The benefits of bees is to plants, to the soil, to the table in terms of crops and so on and so forth, right? So it's all one big universe.
It's one big ecosystem, right? And it needs to balance. So
Right.
what happens when it's out of balance? What happens if when you're planting your garden, let's say you put in, and it could even be native, but you don't diversify what you put in? What happens if you've got a row of the same kind of native, pick whatever plant you want, and one of them becomes diseased? What happens to your row of plants?
Spreads quickly.
It spreads quickly. In fact, it spreads very quickly, right? Because if it attacks one, it's going to attack the other. So we talk about biodiversity like Elizabeth talked about, and it's important to an entire ecosystem. But if we break it down even smaller, biodiversity becomes incredibly important when we plan a landscape design. So if we're planning something, I'm not sure if boxwoods are native any place, but if that's what we're going, certainly not down here, but if that's what we're going to do, yeah, Kelly's shaking her head no. If that's what we're going to plant and you end up with something called boxwood blight and it spreads from one to the other, and you've put in this gorgeous hedgerow of 154 boxwoods, what's going to happen to your 100? Kelly's laughing at me. What's going to happen to your 154 boxwoods? What's highly likely that it's going to happen?
They're all gonna die.
They're all going to die. They're all going to get boxwood blight. And you can
Bacteria.
tell down here, they just can't grow, right? It stays too warm at night and it's too humid. And you can tell where people really are trying to force it because they keep trimming out the diseased part. And what you have is like one stem with some leaves at the top and then another one because they keep cutting it out because it keeps getting diseased. So when we look at the entire ecosystem and we look at biodiversity, we look at it from a macro level, which is what Elizabeth was talking about, that we need to make sure that we have more than one kind of bee, that we make sure that we have the food necessary to support the more than one kind of bee, that we have more than one kind of turtle, that we make sure, to Daniel's point, that the forests are protected and the habitats are protected and all of these others are. And we try and do it universally in the United States by federal policy and then locally by state and local policy. And sometimes we don't get the protection or the enforcement that we as landscape designers believe we need, right? It's you put up a sign that says it's an invasive. Okay, fine. I like the plant, so I'm going to put it in my yard anyway. And you told me that it's an invasive, and so what? So we need to find a way that we can better educate, because I'm not sure that we're going to be able to fine or ticket our way out of some of these situations. I think it's going to take community support, community engagement, community education, and looking at better policy. So, Carolyn, not picking on you, but looking at the policy that you found that gives you some heft to go talk to your landlord, was there anything you'd want to add into that? Was there anything missing from that policy that would give you more backup for your argument?
Sure. Well, bringing it up to date to 2026, because it looks like the initial code went into effect in 2005. I would want to add more or have mention of stormwater management. So, for example, yesterday, out my window, I've got idling diesel trucks and leaking some sort of stuff. And yes, it hasn't rained and things are kind of like holding steady, but I would like to know where could the policy improve in managing or addressing runoff, right? Not to mention the glyphosate that they were spraying around the property. And another thing that I thought of too, which I think about every night when I leave here, is the lighting. Oh my goodness. So we've had a couple of break-ins in the area. No one broke into our building, but everyone's got, no, that was an exaggeration. A lot of people have these really, really bright spotlights. So I'm thinking, okay, I would like to approach the people who created this code and incorporate more understory plants and native grasses and things like that. But also, I'm also thinking, okay, so now I want to promote the understory vegetation to be more native plants instead of grass, mow and blow and whatever go. But now they might be drawn to the lights and they're all going to just fizzle themselves out with these bright lights. So now I'm thinking, okay, so I would like to have them include not just a plan for the runoff, but also, and not using chemicals and pesticides on the properties, but also how can we modify the lights to be more bug friendly and bird migration friendly. I'm a nut at my house with making sure the lights are off, the blinds are down, especially during migration. And I really think it's a matter of educating the public. I can go on for an hour about what I want to do. So yeah, you weren't picking on me at all. I want to lower the speed limit. I just lost a bird. Someone ran over one of my birds. So yeah, I could get myself into some trouble, but those are just a few things that are top of mind.
So that's okay. So I'm glad you did that, because what you can do and what any of you can do is, as you're looking at these pieces, these policies, these pieces of legislation, if you want them amended, it's easy enough to ask an elected official to do that. You just have to make sure that it's germane, right? So we can't take something that has nothing to do with this statute and say, I want to amend it with something else. It has to, because they're going to say it has to meet the germaneness test. So that's something else to take a look at. And so when we're looking at all of these all of these environmental policies and what they have and what they don't have and how we might make them better, we want to keep germaneness in the back of our mind. We want to keep biodiversity in the back of our mind, native plant policies in the back. Did anybody find anything in their research that specifically stated that people were encouraged to plant native plants? They would be given tax credits or stormwater management credits or clean air credits, or nobody found anything that had anything positive with native plants, just negatives on invasive plants.
Yeah.
Well, hmm. I was just going to say that you have to get a permit for these plants, and the ones that had more native plants were going to be more likely to be approved and approved quickly. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. In my research, the state does recommend that citizens replace invasives and non-invasives with native plants, but there's no incentive to do that. And I think one of the problems with the natives is they're not as showy as some of the non-natives and the invasive plants. So how do you convince a homeowner to get a narrow leaf coneflower that has really narrow spindly petals versus the purple coneflower, which is more lush and vibrant? So those are some of the challenges. But there's nothing to say here's an incentive to do that now.
So when we look at this, and again, keeping environmental policy in the back of our minds and biodiversity and pollinators and making sure that whatever we design helps keep a balanced ecosystem or balance an ecosystem, what are the top two things that you think we should look at first? I mean, there's no right or wrong answer, but somebody calls you up and says, I want you to come redesign my yard, or I'm building a house, I want you to design it. What are the first two things that you're going to talk to them about?
I would say, what's the history of the property? What's the history of the landscape we're talking about? What was there historically?
Okay, that's a start. I mean, where I live, it was a peanut plantation.
Mm-hmm.
So we have really, really high phosphorus in the soil.
Yeah. Well, and how do you want to use the space? What do you envision doing in the space?
Yeah, what's important to you, right? Do you have kids, dogs? Who's going to play? What else? What else would you ask?
I would ask, what do you want to keep? And what do you want to get rid of? And what do you imagine? What do you like? What would you like to replace anything with?
That's an important question if you're redesigning, right? Like what's here that you want to keep? What do you want to get rid of and why? Is it a color? Is it a texture? Is it just a non-native and you want to convert to native?
For me, I would also want to find out what's their level of knowledge with regards to native plants. So my friend who's letting me volunteer, her property is my playground right now, and I'm educating her on how much easier these plants are to grow and to maintain and how quickly they look pretty good. So I would want to find out, like, what's the starting point? How much do they know about native plants? Is that important to them?
So how would you get into discussing pollinators? And for next week's reading, you're going to get into endangered species, but would you get into any of that part of it, of a discussion with them, with a potential client?
Well, I mean, if the opportunity arises, sure. Like if they were asking questions like, no, what is a native plant? My husband introduced me to native plants only 5 years ago, and I am like the Lorax right now. So he brought me to Bowman's, and I'm like, everything's green. So I've been transformed. So I understand what it's like to not know. And I also know that I'm appreciating the diversity in the things that I've planted. So I start with what I've experienced, what my story is. And if they're like, oh, cool, tell me more, then I would. If they're like, no, 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 that would be my father-in-law, then that's not the audience for me. I have to use my psych skills somewhere, right?
That's true. That's true.
I think that it's interesting. So you're talking about native plants, but I think it comes back to sustainable landscaping, right? Because there are also plants that have adapted and are as beneficial as native plants that also provide sustainable landscaping, right? I know because again, I'm in the gardening field too, and we do a lot of focus on sustainable gardening, and the clients aren't necessarily the discussions aren't really, is the plant native or not? It's really about whether um, the plantings will provide a sustain level of sustainability and either, how they grow and, the level of any fertilizers or, that needed to keep them growing or the level of water that's going to be required and so on and so forth. So I'm just throwing that out that it, I think native plants are absolutely, a critical part of our ecosystems, but there are also adaptive plants that are just as beneficial, particularly, for pollinators where the pollinators migrate and adapt, right?
Mm. Usually I'll ask a person or client, tell me, identify a garden space that you visited that you absolutely love. And then identify a garden space that you could not connect with, that you felt nothing. And then start from there, and try to get an idea of what the plantings were. And then instead of non-natives, where could you use natives to replace the non-natives and have that same effect? It's,
Kelly, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, so I was saying maybe I would suggest to them a soil survey. That way you could kind of convince them that, hey, these are the native plants best suited to this type of soil.
Yeah, I mean, here, Extension does it for free between April 1st and Thanksgiving. And then between Thanksgiving and April 1st, they charge individuals for it because they're busy doing the farmers and the golf courses.
Mm.
But it's a good idea, right? Because we don't know if something will grow or won't grow, or we'll need the soil amended, or to Elizabeth's point, more fertilizer or less, or whatever it's going to take to balance it.
Right.
overarching too is who's maintaining this garden space.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah,
may
I
be
was gonna say on that token, I think 100% of clients want a low maintenance garden. And all these conversations are relevant where you're talking about, are they native, which probably means they're adapted to using less water. They're probably not going to need to be maintained as heavily. But yeah, a sustainable landscape is also one that you can maintain without breaking the bank.
Or your back.
Yeah.
Did anybody have trouble with the research I mean, I know sometimes that policy and legislation is difficult to read or difficult to stay focused on, but did anybody have difficulty with the research or difficulty with the assignment?
Only the breadth of information, right?
Yeah.
Like there were a couple comments about going down rabbit holes. And I mean, there are thousands of rabbit holes to go down. It's just absolutely, amazing how, you pick one topic and then you have to like further segment it, right? And specialize it because there's just so much happening. Well, I guess it's a good thing, but it's just a
Well,
lot of information, a lot.
there is a lot. And it is important that you learn how to filter it out and to go down fewer rabbit holes or to go not quite so deep down the rabbit holes. So, I mean, sometimes you're right. They're fun because sometimes you find things that you had no idea were out there. So, like I said, I graded if you turned it in before 2 o'clock. I was tickled. I didn't know what to expect. This is the first time that I've taught this course, and it's obviously the first time that it's been offered. So I wasn't sure how people would write it, how they would interpret it, handle it, and it was all quite good. I mean, I wish there was a way you could share it with each other, and maybe somebody will tell me how to do that in the next class. But I think that besides just a discussion group, but I think that y'all had some really good information that would help each other, I think. So,
Um, in my other class for landscape design, we use something called Miro. It's
yeah,
like a shareable board that you can upload everything to.
that's an idea.
I think you
Yeah.
can also just upload a PDF or something to the discussion board. Can't you?
Yeah.
Something like that.
As long as people are okay sharing it, we can set that up the next time we offer the course. I think that's a really good idea because you can take good ideas from each other and adapt them into where the holes that you see in your policy and your legislation. So for next week, you have reading assignments. They're all listed, but we're really looking at water for next week. So there are three articles that are listed under your reading assignment. All of them are Environmental Protection Agency. One of them is Water Efficient Landscaping. One of them is Water Sense, and the other one is a summary of the Clean Water Act. And there's 4 key points that I want you to be ready to discuss next week. And so that's the reading assignment. And then there is, of course, a writing assignment. So like I said, the work that you turned in was really good. So keep that up. So what I want you to find, and one of the reasons I asked if anybody had trouble with research, I want you to find a case study on native plant restoration or wildlife habitat rehabilitation. Explore real world examples of successful ecological restoration projects. I would prefer it be near where you live or an area that has some meaning to you. I told you last week, I don't like busy work. So I'd like it to have some value to you in what you're doing and what you're interested in. So find a case study on successful native plant restoration, wildlife habitat rehabilitation project. Ensure the case study includes, and all of this is written in there for you, but project goals and objectives, methods used for restoration or rehabilitation, outcomes and measurable success indicators, and challenges faced and how they were addressed. And one of the questions that I asked you as you were explaining what you did was, did you think that there were sufficient guidelines in place that would to help ensure that the law was carried out? And one of the reasons I asked was because when I read Sonia's about they stick a sign in front of it and say this is invasive, but you can buy it anyway. I would, okay, you buy it and I'm going to put a penalty on it. Or didn't they, when they tried to stop cigarette sales when there were those big lawsuits, didn't they increase the taxes on cigarettes or something? I mean, is there a way that we can slap a tax on invasive plants? Okay, you can buy it. We're not going to curtail that, but we're going to charge you an extra $50 or double the price of it or something. So, when you look at this, how do you measure success? And, Elizabeth said it isn't just that you can count the bees. There has to be that it's sustainable, that there's enough food, that there's some biodiversity there. So, and remember, outcomes are not just positive. Outcomes can be negative. So it can be something like, well, you can still buy an invasive plant. Well, that's a negative outcome. You can still buy it. So take a look at the outcomes and use a little bit of a broader mind when you look at it. The challenges that they faced in this case study and how they were addressed. So when I asked you before if policies came top down or bottom up, when policies are usually written and then implemented and measured, if it started at the top and went to the bottom, right? It starts at the top at the federal government and it's implemented and pushed down to state and local and us. Then it's measured and that information goes back up to the top, and then that legislation or the policy or the is amended and a new bill is put in or an amendment is put in, and then it goes again, right? So that's the implementation cycle for legislation or laws. So when you look at this, what were the challenges that were faced? How were they addressed? And something that is not here is, what would you change? You've now done the research on some. You now can look at shortfalls. Tell me, in this case study that you've looked at, what were some of the shortfalls? Right? And how would you improve it? Remember, you can improve it by incentives or disincentives. It's up to you. Whatever makes most sense in looking at this from an environmental policy perspective. So the same rules hold, however, it's however long it needs to be. And submit it, please, before next Wednesday at midnight, and then I can, or noon on Thursday. Then I can grade it and get you some feedback back, which I think that sounds really stuck up. I think it has value to get feedback. Sonia's laughing at me. I think it has value to get feedback back. And I hope that when I give it to you, it's valuable. Again, I don't like to waste time. So that's what I'm expecting next week. You do have some reading to do. Did anybody get through any of the extra resources that I put in there, like the Eagles Island book or the video that the students put together?
I just quickly perused it. I haven't had time to really delve into it though. No.
If it, like I said, that's a project that was taken on by community. So this is a bottom-up proposition, and the videos that are there were done by University of North Carolina Wilmington students. So we have a whole curriculum here based on oceanography and marine life. And in trying to maintain this island and have it not turn into a dumping ground, the students put together these sets of videos, and then there is that book that discusses Eagles Island and the benefits that it has. So, yes, ma'am.
Rose, sorry, can I ask a rather simple question? So I'm not entirely sure where we would go to find a case study. I was thinking initially that these are really more likely to be government-driven cases, if you will, because I don't think private cases, they would necessarily publish all the results and such. But then you were just mentioning that the one of the cases that you presented was bottoms up. So any suggestions on how to identify or locate a case study?
Sure, hang
And
on.
again, I just haven't gone down this path before, so maybe there's a website, just case studies.
Yeah, hold on one second. Case study on, what do we want here?
Or if anybody else has ideas.
Yeah, I'll just jump in
Okay.
real quick. So when I looked at the municipal plans, the master plan, and this is in Pennsylvania and Chester County, their master plan provided some examples, case studies. Of some cases.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe on the municipal level.
Excellent.
So just a quick Google search. I just typed in case study on wildlife. Of course, I spelled it all incorrectly. Wildlife restoration in Pennsylvania. And my AI came up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 examples. Black bear, American kestrel, urban bird conservation, Trout Creek, and raptor corridor
Oh, excellent. So it sounds
So,
like this
I
is going to
mean,
be pretty
It's easy.
well published. Okay.
your phone is hearing everything you're saying, so I'm sure your phone will just guide you right there. So
Excellent.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I typed it in using Perplexity and it came back up. The Great Meadow Wetland Native Plant Restoration Project at Marsh Billings Rockefeller National Historic Park in Vermont. I looked at it differently. I wanted case studies on native plant restoration.
Mhm.
So the more specific you make it, the fewer are
Right.
going to come up.
Yeah.
So,
Again, I just wasn't sure if these
you're
were
fine.
published, so that's great.
Yeah. Anne said you might look at UMass or other universities. Because like the ones for Eagles Island, they're published.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm part of the UMass Aggies Association, so that's fine. I will take a look at
There you
those.
go. So
Excellent.
you've got that. Any other questions? So last week went all right for you, not too much reading. The writing was okay. Okay, then. If nobody else has any questions, we'll call it an early night at 20 minutes of, and we accomplished everything we needed to.
Excellent.
If there's no questions, good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.